A sharp crackle bursts across the radio. For 2 seconds, a jumble of alarms and a frantic voice bleed into the frequency, then vanish. On this quiet Sunday in March 1974, no one in the Paris control room knows what they've just heard. The transmission is too fast, too distorted to decode. Controllers glance toward one another, puzzled, unaware that a DC-10 climbing north toward London has just suffered a structural failure deep inside its fuselage. For now, the skies above Paris still look calm. Earlier that afternoon, Turkish Airlines Flight 981 had departed Orly Airport, running late but stable. The unexpected rush of passengers caused by a British airline strike had filled nearly every seat on the second leg to Heathrow. Families settled in, business travelers tucked newspapers into seat pockets, and a group of rugby supporters joked quietly as the engines eased the aircraft into the sky. A soft chime drifted through the cabin as the seatbelt sign extinguished, offering a brief sense of normalcy. Inside the cockpit, 3 seasoned Turkish aviators guided the heavy DC-10 through its climb. Captain Necdet Burkaz monitored the engine gauges, while his first officer coordinated with Paris departure. The flight engineer oversaw pressurization and electrical systems, routine checks they had performed hundreds of times. The aircraft responded smoothly, its wide-body frame settling into a steady ascent toward flight level 230. Nothing in their instruments suggested that anything was amiss. But beneath the cabin floor, a flaw lurked in a place passengers would never see. The rear cargo door, locked earlier on the ramp, carried a history of concern, one documented in internal memos and earlier incidents. Engineers had warned that the design allowed the outward opening hatch to appear secured even when its mechanism wasn't fully engaged. In normal operation, the difference was invisible. In flight, the consequences were catastrophic. Back in the cabin, a few passengers leaned toward the windows as the aircraft passed over the French countryside. A mother guided her child's hand along the glass, tracing the fields below. The atmosphere remained quiet, just the hum of engines, the shuffle of newspapers, and the steady rumble of climb. None of them could know that a critical weakness was building pressure below their feet, waiting for the moment it would finally give way. The groundworker paused, then forced the cargo door handle fully shut. On the afternoon of March 3, 1974, the normally quiet Paris-London leg of Turkish Airlines Flight 981 was anything but ordinary. A strike in the United Kingdom had disrupted multiple carriers, leaving hundreds of stranded travelers searching for any seat available. The DC-10 scheduled for Heathrow, usually half empty, became one of the few remaining options. As boarding began at Orly Airport, a wave of unexpected passengers flooded the gate area. Inside the wide-body cabin, the atmosphere carried the energy of a disrupted travel day. British families hauled luggage into overhead bins. Japanese tourists compared camera cases and tour maps. American and French passengers shuffled to their rows, relieved simply to be on a departing aircraft. The aisles filled with a low murmur of conversation, the rustle of coats, and the soft clunk of seatbelts being pulled tight. Toward the rear, a group of rugby supporters settled in, still talking about the recent France-England match. Their laughter cut through the hum of the cabin, adding a brief note of normality to the crowded space. A chime echoed overhead as the crew closed the doors and prepared for pushback. Parents quieted restless children. Flight attendants secured the galley. The aircraft felt unusually full for a short international hop. Up front, in the cockpit, the 3 Turkish crew members worked through the final checklists. Captain Necdet Burkaz reviewed the weather along the corridor to London. Calm winds, clear air, and no expected turbulence. The first officer prepared the departure procedures, while the flight engineer monitored pressurization and fuel systems. Every gauge read normally, every system behaved as expected. There was no reason to anticipate anything other than a routine climb across northern France. Yet outside, moments earlier, the difficulty closing the rear cargo door had not gone unnoticed. The mechanism had required extra force to lock into place. On this aircraft model, that detail mattered, but to the ground staff pressed by time and a late departure, the latch appearing closed was enough to continue operations. Back in the cabin, the engine spooled up, sending a gentle vibration through the floor.
Passengers leaned back as the DC-10 rolled toward the runway. There was no hint that beneath their feet, a critical weakness, one previously documented, now sat sealed behind a fragile layer of metal.
Turkish Airlines Flight 981 was only minutes into its climb when it leveled through the thin spring clouds northeast of Paris. Below, the town of Mole drifted past, unnoticed by the passengers settling into their short flight to London. The DC-10 felt steady, its wide wings slicing through calm air. A soft chime sounded overhead as the crew prepared for the next stage of the ascent. But far beneath the passengers' feet, in the lower fuselage, the aircraft was entering a zone of growing stress. As the cabin pressurized, the outward-opening cargo hatch began absorbing increasing force. Its locking mechanism, meant to hold firm under far greater pressure, had not been secured correctly on the ground. The worker who closed it had relied on feel, not warning placards written in languages he did not speak. And on this aircraft, almost locked was no safer than fully open. Inside the cockpit, the crew monitored their climb toward 23,000 feet. Nothing on the instrument panel showed any anomaly. Engine readings were steady. Controlled inputs felt normal. The aircraft responded smoothly as the pilots adjusted their heading toward the London airway. Back in the cabin, passengers reclined into their seats. A Japanese tour group passed a camera down the row to photograph the scenery. A British child pressed his hands against the window, watching the countryside fade into distance. The atmosphere remained calm, with only the rhythmic hum of engines filling the background. Then, in the cargo hold, the flawed linkage gave way. Without warning, the hatch blew outward in an explosive burst of pressure. The force ripped open a gaping section of the fuselage. A violent rush of air blasted upward through the cargo bay. The cabin floor above the rupture buckled, then collapsed, pulling seat rows and 6 passengers through the opening and into the sky. Simultaneously, vital flight control cables routed beneath the collapsing floor were severed instantly. The elevators and rudder, essential for stable flight, went dead in a single moment. In the cockpit, the aircraft jolted, the nose dipped sharply. Warning sounds erupted across the instrument panel. And for the passengers still inside, the calm cabin turned into a roar of rushing air and sudden, disorienting descent.
The aircraft's nose begins to dip with unnatural urgency. In the next instant, the DC-10 enters a steep descent that no one on board expects. Captain Burkos grips the control column, pulling back with practiced precision, but the aircraft barely responds. Wind roars against the fuselage, growing louder as the descent steepens. A chime echoes through the cabin, followed by a sudden tilt that pushes passengers against their seatbelts. Loose cups and magazines lift into the air, drifting for a moment before sliding violently toward the front. In the cockpit, the crew watches their instruments unwind at alarming speed. The elevator indicators remain frozen, offering no feedback. The severed cables that once linked the cockpit to the tail now hang useless beneath the shattered cabin floor. Burkos calls for power changes, hoping to raise the nose through asymmetric thrust. The engines surge, their deep rumble vibrating through the airframe, but the descent barely shallows. Passengers feel the nose-down angle grow sharper. A soft thud rolls through the cabin as overhead bins strain against their latches. Some passengers instinctively brace, others grip armrests as gravity pulls them forward. Outside the windows, cloud layers sweep past faster than the human mind can process. 77 seconds stretch into a lifetime. The crew coordinates rapidly, scanning for any sign of recovery. The altimeter spins downward, each passing second marking another impossible loss of altitude. Despite the roar, the cockpit feels eerily focused. 3 aviators locked in a final, disciplined attempt to control an aircraft that no longer listens. The engines respond with precision, but aerodynamics do not. the DC-10 continues its accelerating fall toward the French countryside. In the cabin, the angle becomes overwhelming. The forest below begins to emerge through thinning clouds, its dark canopy rushing upward with terrifying speed. The crew maintains every procedure available to them, adjusting thrust, stabilizing roll, and fighting the descent until the very last moment. There is no chaos in the cockpit, only the relentless discipline of professionals facing physics beyond their control. At nearly 800 kilometers per hour, the DC-10 meets the Romeoville Forest. The impact ends the 77 seconds of impossible flight, leaving behind one of the most devastating moments in aviation history. The silence that follows stands in sharp contrast to the frantic struggle that unfolded above, a reminder of how quickly
Control can be lost that day. In the woods of Fontaine-Chalice, the impact scatters metal, luggage, and fragments of the DC-10 across hundreds of meters. The aircraft has struck at full speed, tearing itself apart in less than a second. Trees stand snapped at their bases, their broken trunks pointing toward the point of impact. A faint haze drifts above the wreckage, carrying the sharp scent of fuel, but offering no sign of fire. The violence has been total. For the passengers, the final moment passes too quickly to register. The cabin that once echoed with chimes, rushing wind, and rising panic is now silent. Seats lie torn from their rails. Bits of cabin paneling rest among shattered branches. Nothing remains recognizable as an aircraft interior. Rescue teams arrive minutes later, weaving through narrow forest paths toward a column of dust. What they find is not a crash site in the traditional sense. There is no fuselage, no cockpit section, no wing structure. Only a vast debris field spread through the quiet woodland. The stillness feels surreal against the scale of destruction. The absence of survivors becomes immediately clear. The impact forces, combined with the aircraft's slight right bank, have left no possibility of life. Responders move carefully, marking debris and searching for anything that might hint at what happened in the sky above. Investigators soon follow, stepping through the forest with deliberate precision. They catalog fragments from every section of the aircraft, pieces of the wing, landing gear, and engines buried deep in the soil. But one crucial component is nowhere to be found: the rear cargo door, an outward opening panel already known to engineers for its potential to fail, is missing. The realization settles quickly. Years earlier, aviation specialists had warned of the exact chain of events that would follow a cargo door blowout on this aircraft type. They predicted the loss of pressurization, the collapse of the cabin floor, the severing of control cables, and the resulting uncontrollable descent. Now, in the heart of the forest, the evidence lies before them. The absence of that door is more than a missing piece of metal. It is the confirmation of a scenario long feared, one that has just unfolded with catastrophic finality in the forest of silence. Some lessons are written in silence. Subscribe to the channel to keep these stories alive. Moments later, engineers pause, sensing they are looking at the cause of a global tragedy. In the weeks after the crash, French investigators spread the remnants of the DC-10 across a vast warehouse floor. Every fragment is measured, photographed, and compared against design drawings. The damaged cargo door structure receives special attention. Its twisted frame and sheared latches tell a story more devastating than the violence of impact alone. It reveals a failure years in the making. Documents recovered from airlines, maintenance bases, and earlier investigations point to a pattern. Technical memos from 1970 describe concerns about the outward opening cargo door and its locking system. Engineers had warned that the actuator linkage was too weak, that the locking pins could be forced into a false latched position, and that the warning indicators in the cockpit might show the door as secure
even when it wasn't. Small fixes were proposed, but few were implemented. Some DC-10 operators even reported filed-down locking pins, altered to ease ground handling, but leaving the mechanism dangerously compromised. As the investigation intensifies, the scale of the problem becomes undeniable. A similar cargo door failure had already occurred on an American Airlines DC-10 in 1972. That aircraft survived only because the cabin floor held long enough for the crew to land. Investigators had issued urgent recommendations, but the required reinforcements and design changes were never universally applied. In the hangar, the recovered pieces of Flight 981 provide the final proof. The missing reinforcement plates, the deformed torque tube, and the fractured linkage show that the door could not withstand normal pressurization loads. The chain of failure that began beneath the passenger's feet had been predicted and documented. It was simply not corrected. What follows reshapes global aviation. Regulators mandate redesigned latching systems, more robust structural supports, and clearer cockpit indicators. Airlines retrofit their fleets. Manufacturers rewrite certification standards for cargo door integrity. The industry changes because it has no choice. Legal consequences arrive just as forcefully. Families filed lawsuits across multiple countries, leading to one of the largest civil settlements of the decade. McDonnell Douglas faces intense scrutiny, financial, technical, and moral. The loss of 346 lives becomes the undeniable pivot point. It forces aviation to confront a flaw that should never have reached the sky, but ultimately reshapes the safety of every wide-body aircraft that followed. In The Quiet That Followed, the world finally listened to lessons written in laws. And in every safer flight since, the memory of those 346 wives continues to fly with us.